So two designers, one built Linear, the other leads design at Cursor. And they get into it on Twitter for a couple of days. And by the end, I think they realized they mostly agreed. But buried inside of that exchange was a question that I think will inform how you work in 2026. And I haven't really seen anybody do a great job of describing what that was. So I'm gonna try to draw it for you. And I brought some receipts. So what happened? Well, on December 12th, Cursor announces their visual editor. You can now edit your UI directly in the browser using their visual inspector. It's a little basic, it's all right, but it's clear to see what it's going to become, and I think that's why it's so exciting. Kari Saarinen, the designer who co-founded Linear, sees this and basically calls it a trap. He says, whenever a designer becomes more of a builder, some idealism and creativity dies. Not because building is bad, but because you start introducing constraints earlier in the process than you should. Ria Liu, the head of design at Cursor, responds to this saying, for years the tools have siloed us. They became selfish, and they stopped being mirrors for how we want to think and started dictating how we're allowed to think. Now this back and forth went on for a couple of days until they conceded, we probably agree with each other. So it takes two smart designers 48 hours to realize there wasn't much of a disagreement, and that kind of tracks. Now this was a good conversation, but smooth brains like mine need examples. But here's why I'm adding to this. One, I've spent the year interviewing designers who work on both sides of this, and we're gonna hear from them soon. And two, at UX Tools, we're completely rethinking how we evaluate design tools. We're dropping the annual part of our design tools survey because it just really doesn't feel that useful anymore to have end of year snapshots when all the things are changing every 47 minutes. But we're also creating a benchmark, and not for LLMs, for prototyping tools. And specifically because of debates like this. All the design tool categories are just blurring together. The way we typically talk about design is floor versus ceiling. Floor breaking makes good design accessible, things like Bootstrap or Tailwind, maybe your company's design system. Here's a decent button, please stop making bad ones. While ceiling breaking pushes what's possible, experimental interfaces, weird interactions, the kind of stuff that gets called not practical by floor raisers anytime I share a concept by ceiling breaking designers. And I know there are a few you nerds out there. Please pay attention. But this debate surfaced a second axis, and I'm gonna show you what I mean. So on the vertical, we have floor and ceiling. And that's what we traditionally talk about the most. These are the best labels for this because, well, I came up with them. And the horizontal axis here is about exploration. So we have over on the left, unconstrained, and on the right, material. Now, unconstrained just means designing without limitations of the final material or code. Think napkin sketches, infinite canvas Figma files, even physical prototypes. Finding a direction before asking if it's even buildable. Kari puts it this way. Early design is about direction. You're trying to find a form that resolves a problem that feels obvious once you see it. That phase that benefits from things like speed and looseness, tools that let you change your mind without paying a tax for it. And I really like that part. And Lee Black takes that a step further. His exploration happens usually before he touches any tools at all.
But I'm a great believer in, I was talking earlier about the time away from the computer. I think that's a super important time where you get time to think about what you're working on. It's not just about being a dribble designer. Anyone can be a dribble designer. It's easy to copy. There's so many templates out there. But it's that time away from when you're designing where you start to develop story or meaning.
And on the other end, material exploration is just designing in or near the actual material, code, real constraints, systems that push back against you. It's Ryu's counter, who says, the truth only reveals itself once you start to build. Not when you think about building, not when you sketch possibilities in a protected space, but when you actually make the thing real and let reality talk back. And neither of these is wrong. The question is about when to operate in each of these quadrants.
Tommy here, quick note. I was thinking about it, and despite the high fidelity of this matrix, I'm still kind of workshopping it. And I'd probably rename some of these quadrants. Are they activities, tools, problem spaces? I've got some additional thoughts and I'll share them in my newsletter at uxtools.co, but let me know in the comments how you're thinking about it.
So here are some examples of designers who work in each one. Meet Andy Allen, a co-founder of Not Boring Software. Their whole thing is rebuilding the standard iPhone apps to be not boring. For his camera app, he 3D printed these physical interfaces so he could hold them, feel the ergonomics.
But for a lot of 3D things, it's still faster to just sketch it by hand. I've gotten a lot more into 3D printing. And so I've been 3D printing a lot of interfaces.
The material doesn't fight back yet, and that's the point. He's exploring the form before deciding on how it gets built, or even if it can. Or Tom Johnson, who's now at Vercel. He would share these wildly inventive ideas that helped popularize the dithering aesthetic that you've probably seen around, produced the handmade Macintosh, and he even sent me one of his custom floppy disk USBs with a dithered portrait of me on top of it. I have no idea how to use this thing. Thanks, Tom. This is cross-medium prototyping. Ideas that were born out of play before eventually addressing the limitations of their medium. But now let's flip the board to Ronno Freeberg, who is also at Vercel, who tells me he explores in the material. He tells me if you have an idea for a chair, you don't just draw pictures, you build prototypes out of wood or plastic, and that reveals the strengths and limitations. And with software, that material is code, which tracks with Rio, who says architects don't sketch free from physics and then invite gravity later. They think through the materials from the first line because they understand that the material is where the truth lives. But this is how Ronno tells me he actually works. I polish only what's essential to understand if my interaction has potential. I'll write messy code, use duct tape solutions, then throw it all away. Spaghetti code is how real discoveries happen. Not production code, discovery code. And that feels like a big difference. And then there's Steve Ruiz, who's building TL Draw. He's an art school graduate turned engineer, an absolute Chad, and a great example of someone who moves cross-quadrant frequently.
Spend my thousands of hours looking at ink move across paper and stuff. So, when I later worked on algorithms that tried to approximate that, I just had a ton of knowledge that was very specific and appropriate for being able to make good-looking digital ink, because I spent a lot of time looking at good-looking non-digital ink, I suppose.
His unconstrained exploration fed into his material exploration. They are kind of in dialogue. And then there's Flo, who is just a badass. She is a self-described designer turned design engineer as of 2024. And she says her exposure to the prototyping tool V0 got her into building personal projects, which then led her to getting a role at Vercel and onwards to more. Side note, if you want to be a design engineer, apparently just Vercel. They seem to be collecting them like Jinwoo's shadows. In fact, Lenny Rachitsky noted a growing trend in top AI companies hiring specifically for vibe coding. Now you might scoff at that, but vibe coding as a verb will likely just be a relic of the times, but the demand for prototyping roles and tools will probably remain, especially if vibe coding reaches the equivalency of, just coding. And when I sat down with Samraj Bhatt, the co-founder of Ion, he drew this diagram live during our interview. He showed me this loop between designer and product, that place where you have something tangible in your hands, which he says that's where the magic happens.
This is when you have it real. You can actually mess around with it. You could click things, you can mess with it. And this is when the love of a product starts to become real.
And that loop is the iteration cycle that Kari and Rio are trying to protect. I think they just disagree on how constrained it should be. Now, Basement Studio out of Argentina, they have created some of the wildest web experiences I have seen. Kid Superworld or Vercel's keynote conferences. And their process flips the typical design then develop sequence.
Our previous process was just like we start with the idea, then go to design, and then go to the development phase. But now we are changing a bit the process, and if we are working on a whole project, like for instance a website, the developers start working from the day zero, and we use that time just to start exploring experiments.
That's material exploration running in parallel with unconstrained exploration. They're not waiting for design to finish before touching code. It's kind of a dual quadrant. But here's what connects them all. In film, we have this concept called garbage collection, where you go out and grab a bunch of footage and then you sort through it later to find a few good moments. Same concept applies to diverging and converging, but it gets way more interesting when you can cycle through it rapidly. It's the clay pot story. One class told to make one perfect pot, another class told to make 100 pots, and the quantity group wins on quality every time. In fact, Rano advises dialing up even the stupidest idea 100 times, and then going back 10 iterations because you might realize, oh, it was the simple one that felt the best. And Lee Black goes on to say, volume does not mean complexity.
You can have 100 tools, but it doesn't make you a better designer. You realize you don't need very much. And I often get questions on X, how many layers does this illustration have? And oftentimes people are quite shocked when I reply to say, look, this background here just has one layer with three effects on it. People often see something and think it's overly complex when really it's not. It's really stripped back and simplified.
Iteration is about cycles and not layers. These first movers, the ceiling breakers, venture out into the hinterlands, exploring new patterns. And then the floor raisers codify them for everyone else once they've proven themselves worthwhile. Both are design work. So here's what's actually changing. Kari's concern is that code introduces constraints too soon, saying the bias rewards incremental work instead of groundbreaking work. And historically, that is valid. It has always been expensive to explore with code. I remember developing my first startup in Sublime Text Editor, slamming my head against the new CSS3 rules for Flexbox. Not a large enough change to keep pushing the Bitbucket, but iterative enough that I kept having to destroy code to explore new designs. And that exploration tax was very real, which is why Sketch came out and saved my life. I was a Sketch stan because of that, long after they fell out of favor. It shrunk time to iteration and changed the way we design software. And AI coding tools are again changing that cost structure. In fact, Stephen Haney, the founder of Paper, put it this way.
A tool like a Lovable or Bolt that lets you make something, and whether you use it or not, it lets you experience it really quickly and think through it.
And that is a massive unlock for people like me who make to think. Ryu sees this in practice.
A lot of people don't realize how cheap or how low the cost it is to build new things now. The designers need to do things up front. The PMs need to do things up front. Things need to be decided. And then we don't waste as much cycles building stuff like we just built once. But then in reality is if you just do that once, you actually don't get enough feedback loops. Versus now, maybe the designer can just come up with a bunch of options and then you send it to the cursor agent. Maybe you spend 5 of them. They'll build all your ideas at the same time, come back with them. What took months is now maybe less than a day.
And it's because the tax for changing your mind in code is collapsing in real time. Discovery code is now cheaper than plywood, unless you're this guy. I have no idea what he's doing, but he's doing it. You can now burn down that onboarding flow and rebuild it in 10 minutes. And as Tom calls out, more tools beget more ideas.
So I have a lot of tools in my garage. I like building things. The more tools I have, the more I use them, the more I create. I don't start doing less because I have more capability.
And Ryu saw this, saying you don't have to be deep in a giant code base to use code as your medium. You can spin up these little worlds and they're alive, running programs that behave and change and break in ways that static pixels never can. And that shift, that one right there, is the one being adopted rapidly. Code used to be the place we'd go after we committed to the idea, but now it is also the place where we can discover it. It's a different kind of material. And Weber Wong, the founder of Flora, puts it this way.
Traditional creative tools, consistency was the default. We were just used to that. Now, randomness is the default. And I think that still trips up a lot of folks. And it is better for use cases where randomness is nuts. But for things that require like robotic just over and over again, I want this exactly in the same place, it's still hard.
The material pushes back differently, not with compile errors, but with variation. And there's another trap that Kari calls out, saying the bias of LLMs is the synthesis of what they are trained with. So the bias is towards the mean. I really like this. And what he's saying is without unique references, you get regression to average. And Tom agrees.
When same means default, that's where I start to have some hard looks at it. Like the default Bolt or lovable website is default Tailwind. And it's really hard to stand out. People are not going to come to your website and they're not going to understand what you are unless your messaging is really good. That's where I struggle with some of these AI generated like tools where I can recognize them from a mile away.
It feels like in less than 12 months, ShadCN is everywhere. Homogeneity is the new risk. But Weber says that's not necessarily a bad thing.
One person's slop and another person's play. And I think slop came out of this negative reaction from the professional creative class who felt like they didn't get something for them. But I don't think there's anything wrong with just, having fun with it.
This is also why it's so interesting to me to see AI prototyping tools starting to let you provide your own visual references before prompting, because this is something many of us have been manually doing through screenshots or, Figma's MCP. And Samraj told me something similar.
If I am trying to ideate on what is possible, I want AI to come and meet me at my thought, right? I don't want it to do my thinking for me.
And he's deliberate about what he protects.
Code is a means to an end at the end of the day. I use it in order to get a product in front of people. Now, writing is something I do in order to explore my thinking, right? Like I have a notebook here, like that I write in every day, and see, there's even diagrams in it here. I draw and write every single day. This is like my fucking 10th notebook this year or something. Do I want Copilot for my writing where it's auto-completing my writing? No, I don't want that, because then it doesn't allow me to sit in my thoughts as much.
He accelerates the code but protects the thinking, which is why my preferred workflow is to do some freeform concepting and then reference it with something like Claude Code or Cursor. The vision comes from me, but the velocity comes from the tool. Although I do sometimes pour bourbon and just smash the enter key until my Magic the Gathering deck building tool just works. And say what you will, but mono white on the new avatar set goes hard. So where does this leave you? I think of the designer's role like a scouting function, and Kari calls it design as search. You're exploring obstructed territory. It's kind of like the fog of war in Civilization. Your job is to discover where to spend the next resources. The question is not, should designers code? It's, are you using the new speed to explore more territory, or just arriving at the same destination faster? And there are reasons to do both. Kari warns, if you let constraints define the space too early, you don't just get worse outcomes, but you lose out on outcomes you never found. And Ryu counters that, saying, if you treat code as a thing you graduate to, that's the real cage. And both are right. The question is, which risk are you most exposed to right now? This is part of why we're rebuilding how UX tools measures design tools. All the old categories, prototyping, visual design, handoff, they're just bleeding together. There is trauma in the marketplace. But Steven kind of sees where this is going.
People that are currently pretty senior level or architect level are going to be running agents, both in code and design, to be able to do 10 times as much as they can do today with their taste, driving the process. And that's the thing, we don't have that tool yet. Very clearly to me, that's going to come, and I hope it's us that cracks it, where someone can apply their taste and their sensibilities and their expertise and remove some of the boilerplate work and be able to explore even quicker.
But this is all a very Gish Gallop way of saying, play with the tools. Play with the tools. There's never been more accessible ways to bring your ideas to life, and the barriers only continue to fall. So I ask you, which quadrant are you in right now? And with all the new tools, is it the right one for what you're actively trying to find? Get out there, fuss around, and find out. I will see you next time.